Today, we're diving into something extraordinary. Trump just squeezed Britain's healthcare system for billions, and I mean billions. Canada's making moves that could reshape Atlantic trade. And the English Channel, well, it just set a new record that nobody wanted to see. But here's the thing, the most intriguing part, the piece that ties everything together. I'm saving that for the very end. Trust me, you'll want to stick around. Now, before we get into the details, I need to ask something. This kind of analysis, the fact-checking, the research that goes into making sure you're not getting fed misinformation, it takes time. It takes resources. So if you find value in what we do here, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're in a position to support independent journalism, consider sponsoring the channel or using the Super Thanks feature. We're not backed by corporate money, we're backed by you. And that's what allows us to tell the truth without worrying about who we might upset. All right, let's get into it, because what happened this month, it's bigger than most people realize. December 1st, 2025. That's the date Donald Trump got Britain to agree to something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. He forced the UK to raise drug prices. Not by a little, by 25%. 25% on new prescription medications. And in exchange for what? In exchange for not slapping tariffs on British pharmaceutical exports. Let that sink in for a moment. The United States, supposedly Britain's closest ally, essentially held the NHS hostage. Pay more for our drugs, or we'll crush your industry with tariffs. This isn't speculation. This is documented. The agreement was signed December 1st. Britain committed to increasing the net price on new prescription drugs by a quarter, and Trump in return promised not to impose Section 232 tariffs on British pharmaceutical goods and not to include them in future Section 301 tariff investigations throughout his presidency. It's transactional, it's brutal, and it's going to cost the NHS an estimated £3 billion per year. £3 billion. That's not pocket change. That's the kind of money that could fund entire hospital systems. But here's where it gets even more revealing. The deal works by reducing something called the rebate under Britain's voluntary scheme for branded medicines pricing. This rebate, it was sitting at about 35.6%. Now it's dropping to 15%. What does that mean in practical terms? It means pharmaceutical companies get to keep more money. A lot more money. And the NHS, which is already stretched beyond breaking, has to absorb those costs. Helen Morgan, a Liberal Democrat MP, she didn't mince words. She called this Trump's extortion of the NHS. And you know what makes this especially galling? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's health secretary, he openly celebrated this deal. Celebrated it. While British families are going to feel the squeeze, while NHS budgets are going to be cut elsewhere to compensate, Kennedy's out there taking a victory lap. This is what happens when you're desperate for trade deals, when you're isolated, when you don't have the leverage you once had. Trump saw an opening, and he took it. Britain needed access to American markets. Trump wanted more money for American pharma. Done deal. Now, if you're wondering why this matters beyond just healthcare, just wait until you hear what's happening with Canada. Because while Trump's squeezing Britain from the West, there's a completely different dynamic developing from the North, and it might just reveal how vulnerable Britain's position really is in this new era. Canada, unlike the United States, is looking at Britain and seeing opportunity, not exploitation. Opportunity, June 14th and 15th, 2025. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, sat down with Keir Starmer in Ottawa. And what came out of that meeting, it was significant. They announced the creation of a new UK-Canada Economic and Trade Working Group. This isn't just talk. This is structured partnership. They're deepening trade cooperation under the Trade Continuity Agreement. They're focusing on digital trade. They're developing critical minerals together. But here's what really caught my attention. Canada committed to introducing legislation approving Britain's accession to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. That's huge. That's Britain gaining access to a massive Pacific trading bloc. And Canada's not just supporting it, they're actively pushing for it. Why? Because Canada sees what's happening with Trump. They see the unpredictability. They see the transactional brutality. And they're thinking we need reliable partners, partners who share democratic values, partners who aren't going to hold our healthcare systems hostage. Carney was explicit about this. He said Canada will negotiate with Trump on its own terms. He said Canada deserves respect. That's diplomatic language for we're not going to be bullied. And in looking for partners who feel the same way, Britain's at the top of the list. It's fascinating, right? Britain leaves the EU to forge these new global partnerships, and it's Canada, not the US, that's stepping up as the reliable ally. Now, before we go further, I want to address something directly. If this analysis is valuable to you, if you appreciate the connections we're making here, take a second to like this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Subscribe if you haven't. These things actually matter for keeping independent journalism alive. We don't have corporate backing, we have you, and that's exactly how we want it. So the Canada-UK partnership, it's not just about trade, it's about technology, it's about defense. In December 2025, at the G7 ministers meeting, they announced a technology partnership program, semiconductors, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence. They're creating a Canada-UK research network on semiconductors with £1.16 million in funding. This is strategic. This is about building resilience in critical supply chains. This is about not being dependent on countries that might use that dependence against you. Think about the timing here. Trump's forcing Britain to pay more for drugs. Canada's offering Britain partnership in cutting-edge tech. The contrast couldn't be starker, and it tells you something fundamental about where power is shifting. Britain's trying to navigate this post-Brexit world, trying to figure out who its real friends are, and the answers might surprise a lot of people who assumed the special relationship with America was unshakable. But wait, there's something else happening. Something that's been building throughout December, and it might be the most politically explosive of everything we've discussed today. Because while all these trade negotiations are happening, while alliances are being tested and reformed, Britain's facing a crisis on its southern border that's reaching unprecedented levels. December 20th, 2025. 803 migrants crossed the English Channel in a single day. 803 people packed into 13 small boats, making that dangerous journey. That's the highest single-day total since October 8th, and it's a December record, but that's just one day. Between December 15th and 21st, over 1,000 people made the crossing. By December 22nd, the total number of migrants arriving by small boat in 2025 reached 41,472 people. Let me put that in perspective. That's 18% higher than the entire year of 2024, which saw 36,816 arrivals. 2025 is now the second highest year on record for illegal channel crossings, surpassed only by 2022, which hit 45,755. The only reason it's not the highest ever is because we're comparing a full year of 2022 to numbers as of late December 2025. If the year had continued, if weather had permitted more crossings, we might have seen a new all-time record. So what's driving this surge? The Home Office and analysts point to a specific factor, a 28-day period of storm weather that prevented boats from launching. Migrants accumulated in camps in northern France. They waited. They paid smuggling gangs, and the moment the weather cleared, everyone who'd been waiting rushed at once. It created a backlog effect, a surge, and now British authorities are scrambling to respond. But here's where the politics get really messy. The Home Office spokesperson called the number of small boat crossings shameful. They said the British public deserves better. Well, yes. But what's being done about it? Keir Starmer's government campaigned on a policy to smash the gangs, to break the criminal networks organizing these crossings. How's that going? Not well at all. Critics are pointing out that 2025 has become the second largest year for illegal migration across the Channel, despite all the tough talk. The one-for-one agreement with France, which came into force in August, it was supposed to create a deportation mechanism. By November 27th, how many people had been deported under this landmark agreement? 153. That's it, 153 deportations, while roughly 134 were accepted. The math doesn't exactly inspire confidence. And this is where everything we've talked about today connects. Britain's being squeezed on pharmaceuticals by Trump. Britain's looking to Canada for partnership because the US relationship is transactional and unpredictable. And Britain can't control its own borders despite government promises. These aren't separate stories. These are symptoms of the same underlying condition. Britain's in a weaker position than it wants to admit. It doesn't have the leverage it once had. It's making compromises it wouldn't have made a decade ago. Trump knows this. That's why he could extract that pharmaceutical agreement. Canada knows this. That's why they're positioning themselves as the reliable alternative. And the smuggling gangs operating across the channel, they know this too. They know British enforcement is inconsistent. They know the political will is fractured. They know the weather's the biggest deterrent, not policy. So what does all this mean going forward? Well, the pharmaceutical deal is locked in for Trump's presidency. Unless something extraordinary happens, Britain's paying more for American drugs, the NHS is absorbing those costs, or cutting elsewhere, or both. The Canada partnership that's developing, it's real, it's structured, but it's also going to take years to fully materialize. Trade agreements, technology partnerships, these things don't happen overnight. They require sustained political commitment, investment, legislative action, and the channel crossings, unless there's a fundamental shift in enforcement, in cooperation with France, in processing claims, in deportation capacity, the numbers are likely to stay high. Weather will cause fluctuations. Some months will be worse than others, but the underlying dynamic, migrants willing to risk their lives, smugglers willing to facilitate it, and British authorities unable or unwilling to stop it comprehensively, that dynamic isn't changing. Here's what I find most striking about all of this. Britain left the European Union promising to take back control of laws, control of borders, control of trade policy. And what do we see 5 years later? Trump dictating pharmaceutical prices, record migration despite government promises, and the most promising partnership developing with Canada, not because Britain's in a position of strength, but because both countries are looking for stability in an increasingly chaotic international system. That's not the vision that was sold. That's not taking back control. That's navigating decline. And I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's important to be clear-eyed about where we are. Britain's still a significant country. It has strengths, military capability, financial services, cultural influence. But the days of Britain setting terms rather than accepting them, those days are fading, and the Trump pharmaceutical deal is just the latest proof. So to bring this all together, Trump extracted billions from Britain's healthcare system using tariff threats. Canada's building a genuine partnership with Britain based on mutual interest and shared values. And Britain's facing record migration across the channel while government policies fail to deliver promised results. 3 stories, 1 theme, vulnerability. Britain's vulnerable to American pressure. Britain needs Canadian partnership. Britain can't enforce its own border commitments. That's where we are as 2025 comes to a close. And if you found this analysis valuable, if these connections helped you understand what's really happening beneath the headlines, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you're able, consider supporting this work through sponsorship or super thanks. This is independent journalism, no corporate owners, no editorial boards telling me what I can or can't say. Just analysis, research, and truth, and that only works if you're part of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Before you go, I want to take a moment to talk about what makes this possible. Every video you watch here, every analysis we put together, it represents hours of work that you don't see. Reading through sources, cross-referencing facts, verifying claims, making absolutely certain we're not spreading misinformation or falling for fake news. In a media environment where speed often matters more than accuracy, we're choosing to take the time to get it right. And that's only possible because of you. So if you found value in this today, if these connections helped you see the bigger picture, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find this kind of independent analysis. And if you're in a position to take it a step further, consider becoming a sponsor or using the Super Thanks feature. It's not about the money for its own sake. It's about sustaining work that isn't beholden to corporate interests or editorial pressures. It's about keeping this space independent. Leave a comment too. Tell me what you think. Challenge me if you disagree. This works best when it's a conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of a community that values truth over convenience. I genuinely couldn't do this without you. I'll see you in the next one.